Welcome to another requested video. This one has been vastly requested by our members, and it's to do with designing quickly. Whether you're in uni or in practice, you're always working to a tight deadline. And what we're going to show you today is just a bit of a hacky approach to getting a design produced very quickly and effectively. So we will do a more detailed video on this topic, and we will do a slightly more textbook version where we will cover site analysis and contextual analysis and sun paths and all that sort of stuff. But for this one, we want to just produce a design super quick. So first things first, you need to ask yourself, what's the project? Now, this project might be dictated by a brief, or it might be something that you have to come up with, whether it's at university, or even sometimes you do get clients who'll say, well, you know what, you tell me what's appropriate for that site. So for this today, we're going to just use an art gallery as an example. So the first thing you want to do when you've got your project brief is consider what the narrative should be. So the narrative of a project is what its purpose is. Nothing to do with what's in the building or the building's program. It's just purely to do with what's the purpose of it. So for example, is there a need for an art gallery in the area of the site? Or is there a particular artist? You might be designing the gallery for an artist. Or sometimes when you're at university, sometimes you do have to design a building based on a particular artist and their artwork. Or is it a competition entry? Again, in the competition entry, there'll be a brief. Either way, you need to decide on what the reason is for the building's existence. Then you move into your concept. The concept is the very first step into the design process. The concept will often come from the narrative. So say the narrative is to, say there's a huge deficit of art galleries in a certain area or something like that, and you're trying to just bring a little bit of culture to the area, and then that area, maybe the history of that area was, or there was a prominent artist that picked up on the history of that area, so just something like that. Then the concept of the building wants to then derive itself from that narrative. So the the concept there might be a direct response to the artist. So an easy way of looking at that is, if the artist is quite a dark artist and they use dark themes in their work, then you might want to design a heavy looking building, very tactile building, and you might want to use limited amounts of light. Whereas if the artist is playful in their work and colourful, then you would want to reflect that in the building design. So you can see how we've not rushed into putting the pen on the page just yet. We're just trying to consider what the thought process is for the architecture. If the artist is a modern artist, then you might simply want to just say, well, I'm going to go for a modern piece of architecture. So with all that in mind, everyone asks me, how do you start? Now, as I mentioned before, we could go into all the textbook stuff, but I think we'll leave that for another video. This is just how to arrive at a design very quickly, without getting your fingers burnt. I'll kind of go into that in a minute. So what I would recommend, if you're in a rush, is you Google design and then the project brief after it. So in this instance, it would be design and then art gallery. Now for me, design is the best website for design inspiration. It's arguably just the best kind of publication website. And sorry, I'm on the laptop here on Wi-Fi. The internet speed isn't amazing. So then what you'll do is you've searched for that, and then design, when you click on the top link, design then gives you a selection of gallery projects that they've done a piece on. So as you flick through, what you're looking for is something that catches your eye. So what I'm getting at here is we're looking for a precedent to kind of work off. Now, the precedent shouldn't be chosen at random. It should be based on the two previous decisions we've made on narrative and concept. So let's just say that we've gone for an artist that is a modern artist. Then we want to look for a precedent that it kind of speaks to that. So something like this is a great example. You can see it's quite playful in its moves. It's very simple and lightweight. Now, you'll see there that this refers to a competition win. Now, competition win. So it's a pretty good piece of work. And it gives you a bit of an idea of the spaces inside. Let's just see if we can find any other examples. They normally do a competition series. Is this a shortlisted? So when there's a competition out, the zine will always do a report on the shortlisted entries. So you can see we've got such a vast resource of examples. Okay, I quite like that. So what we want to do is we want to bear that project in mind. Now, again, as I say, your design should always be relevant to its site. But I suppose what I want to just get across is that one of my favourite tutors at university said to me that nothing is new. I was always worried about getting a bit too close with copying ideas and things like that. Now, I'm not advocating copying ideas, but there's no harm in taking inspiration from some of the best architects out there. So for me, I think that is an excellent design. You can see that the canopy of the building extends and it creates covered areas. So if we just use that as an example. Okay, so now that we've found our inspiration, let's just save that off to the desktop. And crack open SketchUp. Now, you may want to do more digging on this project and find more about, find out the floor plans and things like that. But I say the purpose of this video is just how to quickly come up with a concept. So for me, there's some nice moves I can see there. You've got your lower level glazing there, so that continues the lightweight feel. You can see the posts continuing throughout. You've got your shorter post there, your longer post taking that main canopy. And then within there, I imagine, is your main gallery spaces. Sometimes galleries prefer artificial light so that they can control it. So I would then arrive at a concept design using SketchUp's very intuitive tools. I quite like that there's an element of the solid form stops at a point and the canopy continues. So you may want to introduce that sort of idea. So you can see that we're not copying the design as such. We are replicating some of the architectural moves. Now I'm just going to keep this design quite linear, just for ease, but I do quite like the curvature of the canopy on the example design that we've picked up on. Now, through the use of components and repetition, you can very quickly make a design look resolved and convincing. So quite quick there to introduce a component. You may even want to wrap that canopy right the way around there. Now, if we just take one more there, I think that would clearly identify that space as the main entrance. Now straight away, just from that example, we're able to generate a very quick form. Now, what I would then recommend is that you deconstruct that form to better articulate it. So what I mean by that is, can some of the main building start to push out? Can that canopy extend further back? Something like that. Notice that the base of this building is heavily glazed. So we want to just introduce a similar element there. Use the offset tool to just recess where we're going to position the glazing. Let's just hide that off. The use of the push-pull tool just deleted the underside of the upper section. You can see the smaller posts on that lower level, so if we take that post, scale it down, as you can see, just articulating the architectural forms. Now, I do quite like the cut in the canopy to form a bit of a green area there. I think that's a very cool idea. You might want to, sorry, forgive that pop-up. You might want to introduce a piece of circular geometry. Some tutors mightn't quite like that, but I quite like the I like the juxtaposition between the circular and the square geometries. Let's go on. Where are we? These are components. Let's type low poly tree. Pop that in. Maybe just rotate one just to add a little bit of variation. Let's just put some internal walls. On this floor plate, just because the lower level is glazed, we want to make sure that when you're looking through the glazing, it looks a bit more convincing. Let's actually get rid of that one there. Just let them float away from the exterior, just so there's no coplanar faces, which is when two faces in any 3D modeling program touch one another. Okay, let's articulate that glazing a bit more. It looks a bit bland at the minute. So if we take one segment of that, make it a component, give it a tiny bit of framing, and give the framing a bit of a black colour. We'll group that so it's easily deleted at the end. And just copy that round, scale it to suit. So we end up with a reasonably convincing set of glazed elevations. Just hide that one, just to make sure we get the right selection. Okay, it's starting to look reasonably convincing. Let's put a ground plane on. Apologies again. Just making a little grassed area. Where the trees are positioned. Just a little change in level just to create that sense of threshold. Let's then delete the floor in here, we don't need it anymore because we've got our ground plane. And then, as much as I like this top heavy design, I do think that box just needs a bit more work to it. So I'm just going to introduce a series of thin windows that line up with the glazing below. We want these as glued so that when we make a recess, it cuts out the geometry. I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. And again, just want to reiterate, we're not being too accurate. We've not paid much attention to scale as well in this instance. We're just trying to quickly form a concept design that's ready for presentation purposes. Let's just get that class from below. Then we might want to just put some more objects on the outside. Let's see if we can just search for sculpture. Can be pretty much anything at this point. We're just demonstrating that it's an art gallery. Maybe just something over there. Statue or something. Okay, then we want to just apply some basic textures. So I think it's called Texture, SketchUp Texture Club. And I think in this instance we want to go for some nice concretes. Oh yeah, look at that. It's the Orlando materials, love it. Didn't even mean that. Okay. Love the formwork stuff. We've of course got a login. Just trying to look for quite an interesting. Let's go for the low res one. It's quite an interesting material. If we just make a textures folder on the desktop, extract these out, and create them in SketchUp. Materials, concrete panels. Actually, let me just select a. You're better going for a solid colour first, and then creating new concrete panels, use texture. Okay. Now we want the canopy to be of a different material, so if we just group that off so it's more easily hidden. Grouping that cancelled the components being glued, so we'll just leave it ungrouped. Mess with the scale of the texture so it looks a bit more realistic. Maybe just lighten it up a bit. Match that with the inside faces of the windows. Then go again with another texture, concrete bay. That's not fantastic. That's not a seamless texture. Let's go for a seamless one that just looks a little bit better over the span of the canopy. Pop down in textures. If we just edit that, untick and tick the texture image, it then gives you the option to apply a new one. There we go, that's better. It's still not amazing, but it's better. Okay, and then we'll apply that material to the columns as well, so it's very Ando-esque, this design. Let's see if there's any textures we can just put on the floor. That'll do. Okay, last but not least, let's drop some people on. Type in silhouette into the components. And then just move these people around, keep them in that group actually. Let's just pop them on the lower level. And just select at random and just reposition them. It's good that there's a decent volume of people here because it makes it look more active. Let's have people walking towards the main entrance. Some lingering around the grassed area. Something like that will do. And then we've got two options on how to show this design off. We either use the sketchy edges, because again this is a first concept, we don't want to be too realistic with it. So if we go into styles, sketchy edges are selected in this instance, and I like to use the pencil option. Turn your shadows on Oh, so, yeah. I'm using a 4K screen here, so that's why some of the menus are tiny. Camera 2-point perspective. Let's just mess with the field of view. Let's make that get that field of view to like 55 degrees. Make it much more dramatic. And make sure you set your view to 2-point perspective. Something like that. Export to 2D. Doesn't need to be 9,000 pixels, it's insane. And then you got concept 1. Again, 2-point perspective. Look at that nice flush elevation. Concept 2. Maybe just get a nice shot underneath, something like that. Concept 3. Right, now if you want to push it a little bit more on the realistic side, just turn them profiles off. You may want to just pop it into Enscape. Okay, now that we're in Enscape, we want to just play with the settings. Just to give us the right sort of look. Introduce some outlines, we'll just make it feel a little bit more conceptual. A little bit of depth of field. Atmosphere. Just cool that temperature off a little bit, take the saturation out. Something like that. Let's just play with the colour of the glazing as well. And then if we just maximise that view, you can see there that we've got a range of shots that we can take. And that's how to knock a design out quite quickly, so you can get back to drinking, stuff like that. I think sometimes some firms they do overcomplicate things. I think architecture can be made quite complicated by architects who are trying to almost over-justify the role. I think if we just keep things simple, we can arrive at designs quickly, and I think here we've got quite a seductive design that has only took us, half an hour, something like that. So all I would say is keep it simple. Make sure you start with a good narrative, a good concept, and then that will inform your research into precedents. And then pick a handful of precedents, take your inspiration from them, and that's you well on your way to becoming a solid designer. So hope that one was helpful, and stay tuned. Thank you very much.